Hello and welcome back to Keto Witness. I'm the host, Ryan, and I want to thank you for joining me today. Our first topic was somewhat of a controversial one, and that was the need of protein in the body. How much protein does somebody actually need? We discussed the highs and the lows and ultimately where I believe most people should gravitate to in the end. Today we're going to talk about another topic that can be somewhat controversial in the keto world, and that is the role of fiber in the diet. Is it the enemy, as some claim that it is? Will it kick you out of ketosis? How much of it will kick you out of ketosis? Well, we're going to talk about that in this presentation. First of all, let me add this. When you go around and you start reading on packages about something called net carbs, typically that is something that has removed from its carbohydrate total the fiber and the sugar alcohols. Let me make it clear, we're not talking about sugar alcohols. I believe sugar alcohols are not ideal for consumption. The reaction a lot of people have in the GI tract, that can should be a red flag for people. But also too, some of these sugar alcohols can in fact raise your blood sugar. I believe probably the safest one is the combination that's used in the original Truvia, which uses stevia and a sugar alcohol base that doesn't seem to have any caloric value to it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about fiber, like fiber you get from food. Is fiber essential in the diet? And the answer is no, because there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. However, just because it's not essential doesn't mean it can't add value to the diet. For example, the natural fibers that you have in your cruciferous vegetables, like your cauliflower, your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, your cabbage, these are real beneficial to the body because it helps kind of create your gut biome, and a healthy one that can really help keep you healthy. Now, let's remember that 70% of our immune health is found in the GI tract, and we need to make sure that we treat it with kindness and treat it with what it needs in order to thrive and survive. So, number one, fiber is not a requirement, but number two, it is important in that it provides the fuel that we need to create our gut culture, if you will. Not to mention, it also helps relieve things like constipation, which some people have. When they start the ketogenic diet, they may go too heavy in the meat and the cheese in the beginning, not realizing that they still need their greens and so forth in the diet to be successful in this program. So, do I count fiber towards my total of carbohydrates for the day? So, and what I mean by that is let's say that your ketogenic diet that you're doing has 30 carbs of allowance in a day. Some people do 20, some do 15, some can go up to 50 and still be in ketosis. I'm just using 30 here as an average. Would I count fiber towards that 30? And the answer is it really depends. And I don't mean to be so vague in an answer like that. I'm going to actually explain this. If it's coming from a prepackaged food, my rule of thumb is count total carbs. I discourage people from getting packaged foods to begin with because they tend to lack nutrients and tend to be stocked up with things like sugar alcohols and what I call junk fiber. Junk fiber, as in we can't even really validate its source because it's in a package. Um, by and large, I count total carbohydrates in those cases because it's just the safer rule to go by. You don't really know for sure. You don't have control on their systems and their processes. And unless you do some thorough testing of your own blood sugar to make sure that it's not doing it, um, my advice is count that as total carbs. If, however, you're buying a whole food product, then we can safely say you don't have to count the fiber for that. And the reason is that fiber that's found in natural food like your spinach and your kale and your turnip greens and your broccoli, cauliflower, nuts and seeds, these are real benefit to the body because it helps draw toxins from the colon, and it also helps to eliminate the waste in the process. Of course, anybody who's taken Metamucil can tell you, yes, it relieves them from constipation. And that's because there's a value to the fiber, not the sugar and other junk they add to it. If you're prone to need a little extra help with that, a little psyllium husk fiber, if you're going to go that right route, get the powder, get it in its pure form where there's nothing else added to it, and then be careful how much of that even that you take. Um, a typical person might be able to tolerate 1 to 2 teaspoons of that in a day, but still be careful. Check your blood sugar if you're going to go that route. If, however, you're talking about a cup of broccoli, a cup of cauliflower, or even a small handful of berries, even, which for most people can do fine on the diet with even that, you can subtract the fiber from that. So let me give you a case in point. In a package of spinach that I have, it pretty much tells me that it has 3 carbohydrates total, 2 of which are fiber, and a portion. So for 1 portion of that, I take the 3 carbs minus 2 fiber and left with 1 net carb. That's the only way that I'll count something as a net carb, is if it's in its whole food. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that this can help people weave through what's going on in their diet. I will say this, however, if you go this approach and you notice a stall in your weight loss, it may be because you may be getting a little bit too much fiber. Too much fiber, and contrary to popular belief, it's been shown that fiber can, in a very small way, raise your blood sugar a little bit. The same way that eating protein can raise your blood sugar a little bit. So we just want to be cautious and make sure that we're not getting 50 to 60 grams or some ridiculous number of fiber and saying, oh, but I only had 15 net carbs. By doing that, you may be inadvertently getting enough residual calories or carbs from the fiber that it could kick you out of ketosis for a little bit. So let's make sure that we're honest about it, and we're saying, okay, if my total is 30 net carbs, then what I need to make sure is that if I have whole foods, real foods, no starches, grains, legumes, or anything like that, but just getting them from like a few berries, a few nuts and seeds, and 5 cups maybe of leafy greens and a couple of cups of either cauliflower or broccoli throughout the day, then when we add them all up in the end, you're probably going to be somewhere between 15 to 25 net carbs at the end of the day, even if you set your marker at 30. And again, you can play around with those numbers to get there. Just be cautious if you find that it's throwing you out of ketosis, and you might have to revert back to counting total carbs. But for most people on this diet, net carbs will work just fine. Even me, who happens to be a type 2 diabetic, does just fine with using the net carb approach if it's coming from whole foods. Now, some people, such as Dr. Eric Westman, promotes a diet that says, okay, we're going to use 20 carbs as your base, and that's in total. Okay, so even in that, I'm going to tell you, you need your fiber. Okay, so if you got 20 grams total on that program, you probably want at least half of that coming from fiber, and even a little bit more than that probably wouldn't hurt. The difference is from his approach. Now he's a physician, he's a doctor, he's treating people who oftentimes by the time they get to his clinic have progressed in their disease, either with type 2 diabetes, obesity, polycystic ovary syndrome, and a few other things, that their heart disease. They're so bad in the wrong direction of health. They're the opposite of health. He's trying to bring them back from the brink of death. And a 20-gram total allowance of carbohydrates is perfectly rational in those instances. He just finds that it works for everybody, that 20 grams. And so he promotes that. And there's nothing wrong with that approach, if that's what you need to get to optimal health. But I also find that there's nothing wrong with using the net carb approach if it's getting the job done. Okay, if it's bringing you back towards your goal of optimal health. So just to recap here real quick, fiber, it's not essential. You don't have to have it because there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Second point, just because you don't have to have it doesn't mean it can't be valuable, especially things from like broccoli and cauliflower. It'll be really good for the gut biome. Let's remember that. Let's remember to add some in. As a rule of thumb, I think everybody should have this because these same foods also provide us vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, things that are really good for the body without overstimulating the carbohydrates total. If it's coming from whole food, I have no problem with you using the net carb approach. Just know what your tolerance is for carbs, okay? And go with it based off of that. As long as you're not getting a ridiculous number of fiber, you're probably going to be just fine using the net carb approach. And I don't believe in using sugar alcohols in the net carb approach. I never have, I never will. I do kind of treat Truvia the same way that I do using aspartame or using Splenda. I don't promote aspartame, but it is known that it's a 0-calorie sweetener, as is Truvia. So in that case, I just don't count it, but I don't use a ridiculous amount of it either. Having said that, fiber, let's have a healthy discussion about it. We can use it. It can be beneficial. We don't have to completely close ourselves off from eating vegetables, my friends. That's what I'm trying to get at. But at any rate, I hope that you found this to be beneficial, and certainly let me know what you think, and if there's any topics that you want us to go over here at the Keto Witness. We're all witnesses to the power of the keto diet. Remember that we are going to change the world one person at a time with the ketogenic diet. You want to reverse your chronic diseases? The keto diet is definitely a possibility for you, my friend. Just make sure you check with your physician before you start a diet like this, because you may be on medicines and so forth, may have special considerations to take into place. Again, I'm not an educator, I'm an informer. Not an educator, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a dietitian, I'm an informer. So this information is meant to be informal only. It's up to you to do your own research before you start the program. Anyway, God bless you, my friends. Until the next time we speak again with the Keto Witness.